They said it was impossible, but I've proved them wrong. We've done the worst adapted DCEU heroes and villains, and we've done the best adapted heroes. Now it's finally time to see which villains, if any, were the best adapted from DC Comics into the DC Cinematic Universe. To do this, I've rated every single villain adapted into the DCEU by how accurately or inaccurately they were translated into live action, and ranked them from the worst to the best, carefully removing the top 15 of them to showcase to you in video list format. But how could this have been done, you ask incredulously? Well, by channeling the almighty powers of the fabled 3 C's system, of course. Those C's being costume, character, and continuity. Costume rates a character's outfit or costume, their overall look, and their superficial physical characteristics. Character rates their personality, their relationship with others, and their powers or abilities. And continuity rates their origin story, their iconic moments, and their overall place in the world, universe, or timeline. Tally them all up, toss them in order, and Bob's your uncle. As I always say, though no one listens, a character's placement on this ranking isn't going to be a commentary on if they're a good or bad character. It's only in regards to how well or poorly they were adapted from the comics in relation to every other DCEU villain. So let's find out if in regards to the DCEU, adapting villains well led to better villains, or if it just didn't matter at all, with the top 15 best adapted supervillains in the DCEU. Starting our ranking with the villain who got number 15, Aries. Though Aries in the comics and movies share a number of similarities to each other, they're also quite different. Both versions are the gods of war, the son of Zeus, and an enemy to Wonder Woman and the Amazons. In the comics, though he often opposes other gods in the pantheon, they still exist alongside him into the modern day. In the movies, though, it is stated that he killed all of them a long time ago in a war to determine the fate of humanity. Though both versions want to create total war for the human race, their motives are very different. In the comics, his reasons change from era to era, but most often he influences man towards war, both because it increases his own power and he desires to prove his ideologies on humanity's true violent nature to other gods who see the good in them. In the DCEU, though, Aries straight up hates humanity and wants to bring the planet to total warfare with the goal to completely eradicate the species. He's had many different looks over the years, which he's also had in the DCEU, with him wearing a very different set of armor during the ancient battle for Earth, his battle with the gods, and his armor during World War I. The movie mostly took inspiration from his most well-known comic armor, a full-body blue armor that leaves only his glowing eyes visible beneath a spiked helmet. The movie kept the spikes and a heavily desaturated version of the color, but it's a lot less grandiose, missing the cape, and instead of having his face badassingly obfuscated by shadow with glowing eyes, it's just awkwardly visible in close-ups. In the comics, he usually takes a more direct hand towards his goals, creating or empowering agents to act on his behalf, and classically aligning with whichever side of a conflict he sees as most warlike. While in the movies, he's a lot more subtle, influencing humans on both sides of a conflict to go further and further in trying to kill the other side until they all kill each other. Though he has been portrayed with this level of subtlety in comics as well. Being such an old character and being based on the pre-existing version of the Greek myth, Ares has a lot of leeway on how different writers choose to present him. And for the movie version, they did make him similar in a lot of ways, but they also made him pretty different in a lot of ways as well. But despite those differences, we can only go up from here. Because now at 14 we have Simon Stag. Wait, when the hell was Simon Stag in the DCU? Well, very quickly in Wonder Woman 1984. And though he does virtually nothing, he does have enough in common to make it onto this list. Simon Stag is the unscrupulous CEO of Stag Enterprises, who was responsible for Rex Mason being transformed into Metamorpho. Valuing profits and the expansion of his company at all costs, as well as wanting to break up the love between Metamorpho and his daughter Sapphire, Stag has pursued many ruthless and selfish endeavors that have put many lives at risk. In the DCEU, we don't have any mention or implication of Metamorpho existing, but Simon Stag is still the CEO of Stag Industries, and is one of the biggest investors in Maxwell Lord's Black Gold Cooperative. When Stag learns Black Gold is a scam, he backs out, threatening Lord's financial endeavors, and later, when Lord has the power of the Dreamstone, he uses it to have Stag arrested. Now, while Maxwell Lord and Cheetah both looked very little like their comic counterparts, for God knows what reason, they decided to make Simon frickin' Stag look like he walked right out of the comics, including the slouchy, surly demeanor, the bushy eyebrows, and the swept-back white hair. After all the crappy-ass adaptations that don't resemble what they're supposed to be whatsoever that I've gone through on these lists, they decide to give a crap and try here for a 2-second character who barely affects the plot and could have been named literally anything else without it mattering? Why? No idea. I doubt he was ever intended to return, so it's kinda... Had we learned more about him, perhaps he could have ranked higher, but besides his look and parts of his personality, we can only guess how similar or different he is, with a major difference being that he's already an old guy in 1984. So, if he's still alive in the modern day to be involved in some non-existent Metamorpho movie, he'd be old as crap. At 13 now, we've got Sabak. Now, for everyone besides the two of you who actually saw Black Adam, Sabak was the main villain of that movie. Sabak in both the comics and DCEU is Ishmael Gregor, who makes a pact with 6 powerful demons to gain their dark powers when he says, Sabak, much as Captain Marvel says, Shazam, to gain his. In the comics, those demons were Satan, Aim, Bel, Beelzebub, Asmodeus, and Cratius, while in the movie they are not named. Both versions start out as regular humans working with criminal organizations, but in the comics he was from Russia and operates as a mob boss in New York, while in the DCEU he's native to Kahndaq and works there alongside Intergang. In the comics, Timothy Carnes was the original Sabak, with Ishmael tricking him into a ritual to kill him and take his power. In the movie, he is searching for the fabled crown of Sabak that would demonically empower its wearer. As he puts it on, he is immediately killed and sent to hell, where he is empowered by those 6 demons as their champion, Sabak. Both versions transform into large muscular red demons with large horns, a pentagram burning from their chest, though the movie pusses out about having the circle around it, and dark facial hair, which is weird since in the movie he's completely clean-shaven before the transformation. Both versions are incredibly powerful, able to stand against multiple superhumans at once, including those empowered with the abilities of the wizard Shazam. Both versions lust for more and more power and will do anything to gain it, including the killing of innocents and unleashing demonic forces into the world. One major difference, though, is that in the movies, Ishmael is said to be the descendant of the tyrannical ancient king Akhtan, while in the comics, he has no connection to the very different comic version of that character. Now at 12, we've got Crocodile Men. In the comics, the Crocodile Men are a species of humanoid crocodiles originating from the planet Pungus, who often wear suits. The main one of which is a criminal named Herkimer, who is opposed by Captain Marvel and serves as second-in-command to Mr. Mind's Monster Society of Evil, within which he leads a small group of others of his kind. In Shazam, we don't learn any of their names, but a group of Crocodile Men get a quick cameo playing cards behind one of the magic doors in the Rock of Eternity that leads to places unknown. They rush angrily when they see the door open, but are stopped when it's quickly closed. Personally, this was one of my favorite moments in the movie, if not the entire DCEU. And combined with Mr. Mind appearing in the post-credits, it seemed hopeful that they were going to be putting together a Monster Society of Evil for the sequel that could even, maybe, have some Crocodile Men among its ranks. But instead they decided it would be a better idea to just create some totally original, generic, crappy villains instead. And how did that work out for them? Huh? Oh, it bombed. Well, only crocodile tears from me. Now up to 11 with Javelin. In the comics, Javelin was an Olympic athlete from Germany who later used his talents for javelin throwing to become a criminal. And that's about it. He's not a particularly deep or fleshed out character and hasn't had all that many appearances. In the comics, we don't even know the guy's real name. In the DCEU, he is all of this, but they also did add on the name Gunther Braun. Both comic and movie versions are recruited onto Task Force X, and both versions die on a mission. Though, as so often happens, in the comic version, he shows up later alive and well. Well, since the DCEU is over, we know he's just good and dead in there. Their costumes are virtually identical, besides 2 small differences. In the movie version, he just wears a small face mask, while the original version wears one that wraps all the way around his head. And the comic version has javelin holsters on his hips, while the movie versions don't, which ties into the other major difference between the two. In the comics, Javelin carries around many different javelins with different abilities, such as ones that explode on impact. While in the movie, he just has one special javelin, which he bequeaths to Harley Quinn upon his death. The other major difference between the two is something we don't have 100% confirmed in the DCEU, but can easily be assumed. In the comics, he originally faced Green Lantern when he was hired to steal an aircraft. While in the DCEU, we never got a Hal Jordan or any other modern-day Green Lanterns, so who he was facing, if anyone, and how he wound up incarcerated, we don't know. Now entering the top 10 most well-adapted DCEU villains with somebody not that well-adapted, King Shark. Both versions are named Nano, and are large and incredibly powerful descendants of a Hawaiian shark god. In his early appearances, there is some ambiguity over whether this was his true origin or whether it was something more scientific, and the movie keeps that by only offering this as what some people claim to be his origin. The comic version has had many inconsistent looks, with things like the ratio of shark to human, his size, the placement of his fin, and even what kind of shark he even is, changing from comic to comic. So, I can't really critique his look that much, since pretty much any shark person you toss together could have at least some connection to elements from his comic look. However, most versions of him in the comics are portrayed as a lot more muscular than his flabbier look in the movie, though, as I've said before, who ain't buffer in the comics? Both versions are violent murder machines who kill and eat people with no remorse, but are not mindless monsters, even able to befriend and work with others on occasion, such as Aquaman or other members of Task Force X. A massive difference between the two, though, is their personality and their intelligence. In the comics, he's been portrayed as sometimes more human and sometimes more bestial, but he can think and he can speak at normal human levels. While in the movie, he's just a simple-minded creature, only a step up in intelligence from something like Weasel. At 9, we reach Granny Goodness. In the DCEU, we only see Granny Goodness for a few moments, and only in the Snyder version of Justice League, making her canonicity here dependent on which version of the movie you personally prefer watching. But as far as a glorified cameo goes, they did a pretty good job. Both versions of Granny Goodness are high-ranking members of Darkseid's inner circle on Apokolips. In the comics, she runs the orphanages on Apokolips, where children are brainwashed and conditioned to become the perfect soldiers for Darkseid. We don't fully know her role in the DCEU, but we see her at his side, ready to lead his forces into conquering the Earth, so it's likely at least somewhat similar. Both versions are older women with white pulled-back hair and a stern, cruel expression. Both versions dress in full armor, though in the comics it's much, much brighter. And while the comic version usually wields a powerful rod into battle, the movie version has a similar-looking staff. And both versions are completely loyal and subservient to their master, Darkseid. If she said or did anything, or was actually played by a real actress instead of just being CGI, she may have been able to rank higher on this ranking, but judging by how other similar apocalyptians who actually got to talk, like Steppenwolf or Desaad, were done, she could also have plummeted way lower. Now up to 8, we reach the 7 Deadly Enemies of Man, also known as the 7 Deadly Sins in modern comics and in the DCEU. In the original Fawcett Captain Marvel comics, they were pride, envy, greed, hatred, selfishness, laziness, and injustice. But in later DC versions, and in the movie, they are pride, envy, greed, wrath, sloth, gluttony, and lust, to align with the 7 Deadly Sins instead, which, in my opinion, is a lot boringer. Both versions are immortal evil beings that caused havoc in ancient times by corrupting and killing people with their base desires before being captured and contained by the wizard Shazam. Each of them encased within stone statues and guarded over in their Rock of Eternity. In the comics, when they do break out, they often possess people and wreak as much havoc as physically possible, while in the movie they are contained and commanded by the Eye of Sin, imbuing their powers into the one wielding it, Savannah, and taking their orders directly from him, likely taking inspiration from the New 52 version of them, where they all possessed a man and transformed him into a new and much more boring version of Sabak. The movie kind of takes inspiration from those New 52 redesigns, but not really, and mostly just completely makes up their looks. Now up to 7 with Deathstroke. Deathstroke has a very small role in the DCU, but was planned to have a much bigger one. Deathstroke in both the DCEU and comics is a deadly mercenary and assassin. Depending on which version of Justice League you watch, he's either brought in by Lex Luthor to join some kind of injustice league he's putting together, or he's given information on Batman's true identity. The second was to lead to a planned Batman solo film where Deathstroke would enact a plan to ruin his life in revenge. But within what actually made it into the DCEU, we don't know the details of his hatred over Batman besides it being something personal. He has fought Batman in comics a number of times, but he's primarily an enemy of Nightwing and the Teen Titans. He has his iconic blue and orange outfit with one eye covered, but it's a lot more armored than it usually is in comics at the time. However, it is a very close adaptation of his outfit in the Arkhamverse games, though that doesn't really count for this list. When they start adapting from adaptations, things can get a little wonky around here. When he removes his helmet, he's got his white hair and goatee and the eye patch, and in his teeny bit of dialogue, he's a no-nonsense professional with a constant scowl. We don't see him fight, but he's covered in weapons like he's usually portrayed, and it's pretty safe to assume he's still quite badass. I would be surprised if Lex invited him there if he was a doofus. From what we do know about the plans for him as a villain in a Batman movie, it's likely he would have been quite different and fallen way down on this list. But since that never materialized, here he stays in the top 10, even as a post-credits cameo. At 6, we get to El Diablo. In the comics, Chato Santana is actually a legacy character, originally taking the name of the vigilante of the Old West, Lazarus Lane, who is better known as El Diablo. In the pre-New 52 continuity, he was empowered by the entity Chutriel and given pyrokinetic powers to seek vengeance upon those who have sinned. Originally a criminal, he seeks out and kills his old gang in revenge for them double-crossing him, but inadvertently kills innocents in the process and tries to walk a path of redemption as more of an anti-hero. Post-New 52, he is still powered by the entity Chutriel, but after accidentally killing innocents, this version willingly just turns himself into the police and is conscripted into Task Force X. In the DCEU, his look and personality are very similar to the New 52 version, but some elements are different. Instead of killing innocent civilians while killing criminals, this version lost his temper while in an argument with his wife, causing his pyrokinetic powers to go out of control, killing both her and his children, making him quite a bit less sympathetic. Like the comic version, though, he immediately went into police custody to pay penance and was conscripted into Task Force X. In the movie, we don't know the exact details of where his powers originate from, except that he claims that he's had it since he was young and hidden them most of his life. Though, his turning into a fire being just before his death likely implies a supernatural origin as well. Now entering the top 5 most well-adapted DCEU supervillains, starting with Harley Quinn. Both versions were originally Harley Quinn, a psychiatrist interning at Arkham Asylum who met and fell in love with the Joker, eventually aiding in his escape and becoming his devoted partner and constantly referring to him as her puddin', despite his freakish appearance and psychotic actions. Both versions are conscripted into Task Force X and are eventually abandoned by the Joker and forced to try to forge their own identities. Both versions are incredibly acrobatic and have a liking towards baseball bats and mallets as their primary weapons. While she was originally portrayed as just a normal girl who paints her face white and wears a full-body jester's suit, she was later given chalk-white skin like the Joker and started dressing in much more revealing costumes. In a flashback, we see her in a version of her classic costume, implying that she did used to dress that way, but in the modern day she dresses in more revealing clothing as well. Though, initially in an outfit that bears virtually no resemblance to anything from the comics, she later returns to dressing in the distinct colors of her original look. Like the DCEU version of the Joker, she's covered in random-ass tattoos, which is not from the comics. But later on, some of them seem to have just magically disappeared. Another major difference is that while the comic version of her relationship with Joker is pretty much completely one-sided, with him only either ever using her affection for his plots against Batman, or just completely ignoring her, in the movies he seems to have feelings for her as well, going so far as to plot elaborate plans to save her after she's been captured and showing worry when they're separated afterwards, though this is more of a difference for him than it is for her. Another difference is that while in the comics Joker murdered Robin alone before he'd ever met Harley, in the DCEU it is stated that she was an accomplice to his murder. There are a number of things she claims about her life growing up in Birds of Prey, but I don't trust anything she says, so I'm not going to spend much time on them, as we don't actually know that much about Harley's life in the comics before meeting the Joker anyways. And like the comics, after separating from him, she begins to become less villainous and forms bonds with those around her, sometimes even acting somewhat heroically depending on her current mood. Comparing a character like this is interesting because she was actually created as an original character in Batman the Animated Series before being adapted into the comics, and has been adapted into various other shows and video games afterwards before being adapted into this movie. So as you can see, this takes influence from all kinds of sources. This is an adaptation of multiple unrelated adaptations of an adaptation of an original character from outside the comics. But I keep it simple for these lists and just talk about what's taken from the comics themselves so my brain will not completely explode. Up to 4 with Darkseid. Darkseid is one of the most powerful and dangerous beings in the entire DC universe, and in the DCEU, they were clearly setting him up to take this role. But since that whole thing fell apart, we never saw that come to fruition. Both versions are new gods who rule over the nightmarish planet of Apokolips, subjugating all within his domain to his absolute rule. Seeking to force every living thing in all of reality and beyond to obey his direct will, Darkseid seeks the fabled anti-life equation. Though the DCEU doesn't go into detail about what the anti-life equation is, in the comics it's been described in many ways, usually as a reality-transcending formula that mathematically proves hope, freedom, and life itself are meaningless and futile, overriding the minds of all who witness it into slaves to the one wielding it. Both versions are beings of pure evil, desiring nothing more than to supplant all of reality with his will, and eventually learns that the anti-life equation exists somewhere on Earth. In the DCEU, this led to open warfare with the races and gods of Earth centuries ago, either with his uncle Steppenwolf leading those forces, or Darkseid himself, depending on which version of Justice League you're watching. His forces are pushed back, and eventually the location of the unnamed planet they'd nearly founded on was lost before being located in the modern day. In the comics, he does not discover its likely location on Earth until the modern day, and he cannot usually have his forces openly invade Earth due to constantly being opposed by the forces of New Genesis, the new god's light mirror of freedom and good to Apokolips's evil. Both through a treaty with New Genesis that ensures both worlds don't destroy each other in open warfare, and through New Genesis opposing the many agents Darkseid sends to suddenly invade the world and search for the equation. Whether New Genesis exists in the DCEU, we never learn. But with the DCEU style, I find it likely that most of it would have been destroyed off-screen, leaving Darkseid free to invade Earth similar to the beginning of Final Crisis in the comics, and adding to the overall feeling of hopelessness the DCEU often had. Visually, both versions are very similar, with gray rocky skin, sleeveless blue armors, and distinct headpieces. While Darkseid has been portrayed a lot of different ways in the comics physically, such as a stockier version in the original comics, the movie goes with the much more muscular and physically imposing versions that's become popular depiction of him in the modern day. In most comics, he's usually depicted as directing his forces from behind the scenes, as he does with Steppenwolf in Justice League, though he has also been known to bring his immense power into battle himself, when he deems it important enough, as seen in the Battle for Earth centuries ago. And while both versions are singularly obsessed with gaining the anti-life equation, neither of them are reckless, stupid, or desperate, rarely making a move unless he feels sure he can win, and planning more subtle ways of obtaining his goals when open conquest is not possible. In the DCEU, keeping his forces back from invading Earth when he sees the combined power of the Justice League could have the potential to oppose him. And though we never officially see it, the Nightmare version of the DCEU future shows us that Darkseid focused his energies on corrupting Earth's greatest defender, Superman, to aid in his conquest of Earth in some way. As with other characters, if things had gone on and his role wasn't so small, there'd likely have been a lot of things that could have been done that would have plummeted him down on this list. But as things stand, he's actually one of the better Darkseid adaptations in live-action media so far. Yeah. And now, entering the top 3 most well-adapted DCEU villains, starting with General Zod. The history of Zod and most Kryptonians can be a bit of a mess in comics, as they were all retconned out of existence after the Crisis on Infinite Earths, and then brought back into continuity after the Infinite Crisis decades later, with some elements of the pre-Crisis continuity remaining the same and some drastically changed. However, Zod as a character remains mostly similar across continuity changes, and the movies took inspiration from a few places for his personality and design. In most comics and the DCEU, Zod was the leader of the military forces on Krypton who rebelled against the Science Council and tried to take control of the planet for himself, sometime before Krypton's destruction. He, and in later versions, his followers are then banished to the Phantom Zone for their crimes after the coup is unsuccessful and are able to escape their confinement in the modern day, going on to try and take over the Earth before being stopped by Superman. Though originally portrayed clean-shaven in a military-style uniform, when he returned to continuity he took inspiration from his iconic live-action adaptation in Superman 2, giving him a darker uniform and goatee. The DCEU takes some inspiration from this version, but also kind of just makes up its own look as well. Both versions desire to conquer Earth, slaughter all of humanity, and remake it into a new version of Krypton, with him as its head and himself and all of his followers being empowered with godlike abilities due to Earth's yellow sun, so that they can continue their conquest of the rest of the galaxy. Both versions work alongside other Kryptonian criminals like Feora, Jax-Ur, and others, though most of their looks and personalities are quite different from the comics, and both versions knew Jor-El before they were banished to the Phantom Zone, giving them a connection to his son, Kal-El. While in the comics, Superman usually defeats Zod by returning him to the Phantom Zone or banishing him from Earth, in the DCEU he infamously just snaps his neck. And while in my best adapted heroes list I reluctantly defended this as there was precedent for Superman killing a version of Zod in the comics, for this one I don't have to, since that was an alternate reality version of Zod, not the one from the main universe who was not ever killed by Superman, cause snapping necks just really isn't his style. And at number 2 we reach Ocean Master. In the comics, Ocean Master has gone through more drastic continuity changes than most characters have. Originally, he was Aquaman's human half-brother on his father's side who got amnesia and eventually became a pirate and supervillain known as Ocean Master. After Crisis on Infinite Earths, Aquaman's origins were revised, so Ocean Master was revealed as the instead half-Atlantean half-brother of Aquaman on his father's side, who learned of his Atlantean heritage and became the Ocean Master, using mystical powers to try and claim what he saw as his birthright. But after the New 52, he was now Aquaman's full Atlantean half-brother on his mother's side, who inherits the throne after his parents' death. This was the version the DCEU decided to adapt, and is one of the one and only times I actually prefer a New 52 retcon for a character. Not complaining about a New 52 redesign. Wow. The comic and the DCEU versions of Orm hate the surface world and desire to invade it for what they've done to the oceans. Both versions become its king when his parents are believed to be dead and start preparing his kingdom for open war with the surface. In the movies, Ocean Master is a title given to one who holds the allegiance of 4 of the separate kingdoms of Atlantis under their rule, which he is trying to do before attacking the surface world. While in the comics, it's just a title he goes by, and he attacks the surface world with just the formidable forces of his own kingdom. Though both versions hate the surface world, they are not completely evil, having a personal code of honor and doing everything, no matter how dark, for the benefit of his people. Like all Atlanteans, he has the ability to survive under the immense pressures of the ocean, making him much stronger and more durable than humans, and has the ability to swim through oceans at immense speeds. Both versions are confronted by Aquaman during their attempted invasions, and both versions are defeated by him in one-on-one combat, where Orm is forced to yield and Arthur claims his place as the rightful king of Atlantis and imprisons Ocean Master. His costume is very, very close to his New 52 redesign, including the purple scales, red eyes, flowing underwater cape, and the shape of his helmet. Though while the comic version has dark hair underneath his helmet, the movie version has blonde hair, emulating what Aquaman is supposed to look like in the comics, not this weird Lobo wannabe. And while in the comics, Orm acts as a sometimes ally, sometimes enemy to Aquaman, depending on his motivations at the time, in the movies he's basically completely redeemed, forming a deep bond with his brother who lets him go free after helping to save his family. And now we have it. The number 1 best adapted DCEU supervillain, who I'm sure any of you paying any attention have already figured out, Black Manta. Like Ocean Master, Black Manta had his origin revised during the New 52 era, with this being the version of him the DCEU took as inspiration. Though different from his original origins, both versions of Black Manta were raised by his father and trained as undersea treasure hunters and pirates. Both versions are named David, though in the New 52 era his surname was revealed as Hyde, while in the movie it is Kane. Either way, both versions' fathers are killed, with David blaming Aquaman for his death. In the comics, it was because when David had been hired to steal some of Arthur Curry's blood to prove he was an Atlantean, Arthur's father suffered a heart attack while trying to defend his son and died. Overcome with rage, Aquaman hunted down the man who'd attacked him on his boat and in the stormy weather accidentally killed David's father instead. In the movie, both him and his father encountered Aquaman after hijacking a submarine and killing all aboard. While fighting Aquaman, David's father was pinned under debris. Aquaman chose to ignore his pleas to help save his father from the now flooding submarine, being told not to expect mercy from the sea after killing innocents, his father dying soon afterwards. Both versions then go from being regular bad guys to completely bloodthirsty and ruthless supervillains, completely obsessed with revenge, and reforge themselves into Aquaman's greatest enemy, Black Manta. Though in the first movie, his outfit is a lot bulkier and has a darker helmet than it usually has in comics, in the sequel he gets one of the most comic-accurate movie costumes of all time, including the large silver helmet, the glowing red eyes, and even the tight black diving suit. And since I think Black Manta has the most badass villain costume in all of comics, I'm down for it. Both versions' suits make them incredibly powerful, providing him with enough strength and durability to rival Atlantean physiology, and the ability to move through the ocean at great speeds. Both versions' helmets can fire beams of energy and contain multiple other gadgets and weapons capabilities. Both versions are incredibly intelligent, able to design and adapt advanced technologies for their suits, weapons, and have an advanced Manta sub to traverse the oceans. Both versions become involved in numerous plots to plunder the secrets of the ocean, both for profit and vengeance against both Aquaman and all those he loves. Both versions enact plans against Aquaman that put his infant son in mortal danger. And though Aquababy is saved in the movies, in the comics he ain't so lucky, leading to even more animosity and hatred between the two. Another difference between them is that in the comics, he's portrayed as being quite racist sometimes, while in the movies this lesser-known aspect of him was not adapted. For all my many issues with the DCEU, and even with Aquaman movies themselves, I did get to see a pretty damn good-looking Black Manta costume swim around underwater and shoot lasers at Aquaman, and so for that, I will always thank them. So there you go. What we learned from this one when it comes to whether it's important or not to adapt characters well from the comics into the movies. Are the best villains in the DCEU adapted well? Or were the best villains the ones who were on my worst adapted DCEU villains list? Looking across all these DC lists, what's more important when adapting a DC hero and villain? What they look like or what they act like? And with our top two best adapted villains being characters who'd been massively retconned only a few years before appearing in these movies, what even counts as an adaptation nowadays when so many characters are being changed so often in the comics to try to make them more streamlined and easier to adapt into movies? What universe do I direct the immense power of the 3C system towards next? Fox, Sony, CW? Let me know below if you want one of these or some other universe entirely. I'm gonna be honest though, ranking the DCEU hurt. I love DC Comics, and this whole universe was not a very good representation of what I love about that universe. There are some parts and characters who are done pretty well, but for the most part, no. Oh no. Oh dear God, no. Oh! But will the upcoming DCU be any better? Dear God, let's hope so. Oh, and I keep forgetting to tell you, I got one of them social medias now, that Twitter X thingy. You know the one, whatever you want to call it. Go join up there if you want to see me make an ass of myself yelling at people online. Until then, always remember, dark side is.